Hey guys, how you doing? This is jpsarrireviews coming to you once again with another episode of Age of Heroes, my podcast. Welcome. And on Sunday, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Batman film. And definitely, who doesn't remember that film? It's considered, by all accounts, and I think fairly so, as one of the greatest films or the greatest superhero films of all time. And it definitely deserves that. You know, even though there's a lot that we can dissect from that film, a lot of things that were not that great in that film, definitely there was a lot of pluses and a lot of things that really changed the way we saw superheroes in film from that moment on. You know, you have to keep in mind, and you have to remember this. You know, it doesn't mean that the comics weren't dark during that time. You know, you're talking about the 80s, where after, you know, you have the Dark Knight Returns, you have the Killing Joke, you have Year One. Batman was already a dark character, you know, and that's something that didn't happen in the 80s by these writers, you know, Alan Moore or Frank Miller. But it really started even prior to that, when Dennis O'Neil started going into a more human route, giving a more darker tone to the characters. So that's something that happens even from Neil Adams in the 70s, and he went along over time. And Dennis O'Neil, of course, was always involved in the process and the creation process of the character, and trying to make it more human, more relatable, to understand that he's dealing with psychopaths. So there was a darkness in it. But most people that do not read comics, they understand Batman, and they knew Batman then from the, you know, in this case, the Adam West show, the late 60s, you know, 70s show. And of course, you know, from the Super Friends, that was a cartoon that we love, you know, we love to watch those cartoons. So it was always this image of a campy Batman, and that was the mindset for most people. That was, you know, pretty much the cultural understanding of Batman, not necessarily from the comics, where we're just a niche group. But of course, the film changed that. You know, it really portrayed Batman in a darker tone, and it's I would say, a master film in the sense of the quality of the cinematography. You know, Tim Burton was fantastic in the way he portrayed Gotham City. You know, and to this point, we always knew about Gotham City, but never saw Gotham City on that, you know, the darkness of Gotham City. It really looks gothic, and he brought all that gothic feel and all that, you know, Tim Burton's, I would say, artistry that he likes into this film, the films he produces. And there's darkness, there is a lot of shadows and a lot of things, you know, even the shots, the close shots. And you remember with Batman, when one shot was closer to his eyes, when he's coming to Batman, all you see is the silhouette, and all of a sudden you can see his eyes light up. It's just an amazing shot, you know, that technically is pretty much a standard in cinematography. He did many great shots, and of course you can see even the face you know, of the Joker. You know, when you look at Nicholson's face, you know, he looks so maniac. And Nicholson, a lot of people might say that Nicholson, you know, play himself in this movie. You know, he can act like the maniac, but Jack Nicholson was a big part. His Joker, although not as close, I would say, to the comics, definitely defined the character for many years. He became a standard, and in my opinion, of course, his Joker, I prefer his Joker over, you know, of course, Leto, and over, you know, Heath Ledger's Joker. But that's just my opinion, of course. I prefer it because it really showcased a Joker that I feel more comfortable with, or a Joker that is not just trying to make a political statement in one sense. And, you know, I would say Jack Nicholson's Joker was, even though it was not necessarily pretty much the origins of the Joker were the same as in the comics, although he took some inspiration from the Red Hood storyline. Although it was not as close to that, it was just pretty much a new version of that. It felt more closer, his motives, his desire to do certain things felt more as the one that I read in the comics. So that's the reason why I prefer Nicholson's over Ledger's. But that's just a matter of perception and opinion. I felt that people that are younger are going to go for Heath Ledger's version more, because that's the Batman they have grown. They have grown post, you know, Batman, you know, The Dark Knight Returns, Poe's The Killing Joke. I started reading comics prior to it, so my appreciation of Batman, or my understanding of Batman and the Joker, and not only the Joker, all the super villains, is totally different. So definitely this is something that, but I'll tell you one thing, the film really changed the perception for good and bad, but definitely it defined the character as as we know it now. It defined the character. And it really changed the way people outside of comics perceive Batman, and also how people were consuming the stories of Batman. Batman became darker in that point for people. Even though it was already darker in the comics, he became darker now in the cultural perception of the world. The world was seeing Batman as a dark character. Was no longer the guy in ties running and having fun with a kid, however that sounds. It was now the guy that can kill you, because that Batman killed. And of course, it's always the perception of whether Batman kills or not. But he did in that film. He did in that film many, many times. And it seems like he, really loved to, bring the pain. But definitely, I could say one thing. That film really changed perception. It really gave us a new picture, but also enriched Batman in more ways than one. It became a standard that many people follow. When you look at the Batman, then 3 years later, 1992, that's what it was, Batman animated series came to be, which is definitely, to me, it's an icon of the animated series. It's pretty much a standard for all animated series. That's how you measure any other story. And brought so many actors and actresses that became part of that series. They became the voice actors, and up to this day, when I read comics, when I think about comics, I read Conroy. In my mind, it's Conroy. But Nicholson's laugh, it was an interesting laugh that even Hamill imitated, because Hamill was imitating what Nicholson did, and he did a pretty good job at it, to the point that actually, I when I think about the Joker's voice, I think about Mark Hamill, but Nicholson's comes in a second place in my mind. That's how the Joker sounds, and it really defined. The comics, went into that route. They took a lot of inspiration. There were a lot of changes into the character from, we got a lot of video games. They were not that great video games, but we love those video games. Even a lot of the stuff on the newer trilogy of the Batman, Batman Begins and all that, has followed the trend that was the standard that was created by Tim Burton. And of course, the Tim Burton film, which is a classic, was followed by not so great films. Although I like Batman Returns, I did enjoy Batman Forever, not so much, and Batman and Robin, not so much. But they all had something to give, and they were all enjoyable experiences. But Batman really cemented the way we perceive Batman, and the way Batman was known, and the way Batman will operate for years to come. It is a fantastic film, even with all this quirkiness and flaws, because you can go back, dissect it, and you can see that it wasn't perfect. There is a lot of cheesiness in it, like Kim Basinger like yelling and screaming, dance on the streets almost every 2 minutes, which is funny. The Joker can be a bit, campy at times. Nicholson in the portrayal, but definitely he was scary when he was laughing, when you saw that smile. And of course, the rest of the characters there. Michael Keaton, I knew you knew Michael Keaton prior to that, more like a comedic actor, but then he became more like a serious actor, and definitely he portrayed Bruce Wayne and Batman very good. I think so. Yeah, he had mobility problems because the suit, he couldn't really move around, and he was really short. And I remember there was a lot of, people didn't want him because they said he doesn't look like the Batman. He's a very short fella, but that's what they were saying. But definitely that didn't really stop him to be pretty good in the role. He was good at it. And of course, we got the Batmobile. Which, to me, every time I think of the Batmobile, there's a couple of Batmobiles I remember. Of course, the Adam West version, which is fun. And I do have the diecast model. And of course, in 1989, Batmobile. Definitely, that's another iconic vehicle that became actually the standard of the model that was utilized on the animated series. They used a kind of like a version of that, and from that point on, and the comics and the cartoons, it's always kind of like a version that is very similar to what was produced there. So it defined the character in more ways than one, and from that moment on, people saw superheroes. The story is not just campy, but they saw the opportunity to make stories that also were darker in tone, with darker themes, and Batman was pretty much the one that cemented that opportunity, because up to this point, Superman, has some dark moments, but it was never dark as a story. Superman has never been a dark character. So Batman definitely defined that, and it became a standard for years to come. Now, we are celebrating the 30th anniversary. It really makes me, reminds me that, time passes and we're not, we're not young as we used to, and make me feel a bit old about it, because I remember when I went to watch it in the movie theater. I was a young teenager, and but I enjoyed the film for what it was. Really loved it. I've watched it several times. I own it, and all the different variants. I do own it, and I still watch it and enjoy it for what it is. Yes, even with all its flaws, there's a lot of good things that came out of that film, and even the soundtrack is one of the greatest soundtrack of all times. I still listen to it from time to time. Sometimes I just want to listen to that type of music, and I just put that and listen to Danny Elfman's music. Is a great created great music for a lot of great movies, but definitely his music, the music that he created for this film, is iconic. And I don't know, it's just something so great about that film, even with all the bad stuff, even that they changed the suit, even that they changed parts of the story, even that they make a lot of quirky things, even though they change a lot of it. Definitely is still, to me, to this day, is a standard that needs to be followed as the quality of a film. It was very artistic, and yes, of course, I think, in my opinion, I can say that has been surpassed by the Batman Begins series and all that, the trilogy. The Dark Knight trilogy. I think they surpass it in quality, but definitely it became the standard for many years, and definitely from that moment on, people saw Batman not as this guy in blue, but they saw this guy that was dressed as a bat in dark and was brooding, and also that live in a very crazy world with a lot of crazy maniacs. So definitely that was an interesting part. So really it's good to remember those things. So it's been celebrated. We've been celebrating Batman a lot. We celebrated the 8th anniversary not long ago, and I talk about it in this podcast, and definitely it's fun to talk about Batman. I love to talk about Batman every opportunity I get. But what do you think? Are you a fan of that film? Have you watched it? If you haven't watched it, then shame on you. You need to watch it and let me know how you feel about it. So once again, thanks for watching. If you're doing this on YouTube, thanks for listening. If you're doing it, of course, through iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Castbox, TuneIn, Spotify, thanks for the support. And once again, God bless, and I'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.